Hello and welcome to the See For Yourself podcast, where we take a couple minutes to talk about a movie, describe what it's going to be about, and then we go and watch the movie separately, and then come back and talk about how we were totally wrong about what the movie was going to be about, and what we thought of the film. Today I am your host, Zhuang Zhao, man of many butterflies, and this is my dear compatriot.
The one who is wrong, always.
Consistently wrong man. Today we are going to be watching Creep. I believe it's a 2014 film. I want to say it's a Netflix exclusive, or at the very least it's been on Netflix for as long as I can remember. And I'm just going to go ahead and jump right into the description. Creep is about a young videographer answers an online ad for a one-day job in a remote town to record the last messages of a dying man. When he notices the man's odd behavior, he starts to question his intentions.
Woof.
The movie is right at like 75 minutes long, somewhere in there. Yeah, an hour and 17 minutes, so 77 minutes. So go ahead, Mr. Wrong Man. Please tell me everything that this movie is going to be about right now.
So just from that screen cap there, because I didn't see a cover, like an actual standing cover. I'm really wondering if this is going to be one of those found footage deals, like Blair Witch type deal. And I say Blair Witch because I can't think of any off the top of my head, but I'm sure it's a common medium there.
We will have to watch Cannibal Holocaust.
Oh, I've heard of it, yes.
It's a good movie.
Let's see, there's that. And, I don't know, it screams those Craigslist ads gone wrong to me. So, surely the videographer will die.
A fair assumption.
Yep, that's all I got.
Are you have you considered the possibility that this is an entire fake out film where it's going to be like leading you to believe that
and nobody dies and it's pranked? We got you.
Well, maybe a prank, maybe it's literally just like, hey, you shouldn't assume things about Craigslist. It's actually a pretty good like place to go find like some neat work and maybe make some friends. I don't know.
Well, I mean, he says that. I mean, in the blurb, I assume, or at least I take it, that he's going there to record the man's last words, supposedly. Like, he's going into this expecting this to be the man. I don't know. Probably, I'm assuming he goes into it thinking the man's just sick on his deathbed, but judging from that screen cap right there, I'm wondering if the man's like, hey, this is just the video I'm going to take before I kill myself. Or you. Who knows?
Yeah, so they leave it pretty ambiguous how the man is dying, per se.
If they didn't even say he's dying, it's just like his dying words or his last words. Or
I do believe it does say dying man, so let's double check on that.
Well, we're all dying, aren't we?
Well, yeah, in the Tibetan sort of way, but of a dying man.
Of a dying man.
Yeah.
He seems awfully healthy for a dying man.
Yeah, they specifically...
Unless that's the videographer. I don't know a damn thing.
It could be the videographer, yeah. You don't know. And this is the cover right now.
Wow, that's the cover.
Yeah, very dark cover.
Yeah, I actually cannot glean anything from the cover.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what you get from me. Are there any very smart topics that you're gonna probe me about whether they're gonna be in the movie or?
No, I mean the Craigslist thing got brought up, and that's kind of like, for me, that's one of the more interesting things about the movie is like the idea of like there was a time where you could just go on the internet and be like, hey, anybody want me to do this thing? And then people would message you and be like, yeah, can you do it for this amount of money? And you would go and you would do it. And that's still a thing to this day that exists.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's even been more monopolized by like Fiverr and shit like that. But
sure. But now, like, everybody has like
these niche things, like you've seen the old Craigslist ads where it's like, hey, I would like some man to come down here, and me and him will tie ourselves to a grain silo and jerk each other off through this tornado. That was a Craigslist ad. And to think that somebody had the audacity to put that out into the world.
You mean they had the courage?
What a brave man that was.
That is the definition of bravery. Oh man, I'm gonna get that tattooed on my back.
But that's that's what this screams to me. This screams grain silo JO session.
Yeah, so I really like that. I also just like the idea of someone having like odd behaviors and that being enough for you to be like, this person's like a scary bad man.
A straight sociopath.
Yeah.
That's fair. I have not my experience, but like my girlfriend's experience with like going to meet up with old high school friends or friends that she's met online and having it be out in the middle of buttfuck nowhere, Barrie, Massachusetts, or something like that, and it's like, hey, can you come pick me up? This guy's actually a real fucking weirdo out in the middle of nowhere. Who'd have thought?
Yeah, I think maybe this is kind of topical for me specifically because, like, you ever wonder why you're the only one on this podcast? And the answer is...
we are in the middle of fucking nowhere, and you have been acting strangely.
Yeah, I'm inherently sort of a flamboyant, strange character, and I think people oftentimes take that to mean, like, oh,
if I have to drive 20 minutes out into the middle of nowhere to meet this man.
Yeah, he's this isn't going to be a podcast.
It's not even going to be at a house. There's going to be a field somewhere, and he's going to be like, over here.
There's going to be a bunch of plastic laid out. Yeah. So I always think it's interesting from that, like, description of it. People are so very quick to be like, this movie's about a guy who's trying to kill another guy. When in reality, it could just be that guy being paranoid. You've certainly seen movies where it's like, the person is like, oh yeah, I think that there are like government, mind control devices in my brain and I'm going, and it's, the movie tries to convince you that that's really happening. But then at the end of the movie, it's like, no, that guy was a stark raving lunatic and he should not have been thinking those things.
And he was living in the city, in the middle of a God-given town that like anybody would live in.
Sure.
As opposed to, I assume this man lives in the middle of nowhere on like 8 acres of fucking his own fenced-in land.
What brought you to that conclusion?
The fact that this guy answers an ad,
sure.
And maybe I just imagined it, but something in the wording suggested that he had to go out into the middle of nowhere to meet this guy.
Let's see if there was something. Because I'm more than willing to accept that you just made this up, and that's...
In a remote town is what it was.
Yeah, he is in a remote town.
The word remote is like inherently something to be concerned about.
Yeah, so it's a young videographer answers an online ad for a one-day job in a remote town.
Is it important that he's a young videographer? Is he impressionable?
Maybe, and
because again, this is how the Craigslist ads work. He's going to show up and he's going to be like, and by the way, I'm not actually 18, I'm 17 and a half. And
young people are also oftentimes more easily frightened,
True.
By like behavior that they don't see. People that are young, like, in their head, they're like, if I say a certain phrase, everybody knows you're supposed to respond to it with this behavior or this saying, we have these sort of like rituals that we create as young people.
Especially, growing up like that.
Yeah, they don't apply to everybody. So when somebody doesn't do the thing you're expecting them to do and you're like, yeah, and you throw your hand up for like a high five, in your age group or in your like small little, high school that you grew up in or whatever the fuck.
And they respond with a dirty look. You're like, this man's never heard of a high five? What an alien.
This person's a fucking like crazy person. How dare they not like
reciprocate in this in this social construct that we've all agreed on.
Yeah. When in reality, it's just whoever the fuck in your like graduating class agreed to it. That's a thing we do even as adults, and we just never realize like, that thing, like we were talking about before this with the guy doing all the like the gay jokes. I think it's very likely that he just got out of high school, and in high school that's what all the guys did.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it's not a far-fetched thing to me. It's just as I've grown, that's not the thing that you throw out to achieve camaraderie with somebody. Is I don't know what your mutual hatred of gays, or is it just your niche humor? Your weird like I'm. It is like the weirdest thing in the world to me because it seems like the kind of thing where if you pointed out like, yeah, that's kind of homophobic, they'd be like, no, it's not. Like, I'm not making fun of gay people specifically. And it's like, no, but like you're making light of their lifestyle and like their like choices and not even in a smart way that like
like in a very ham-fisted kind of way.
Right.
It seems, like when you really think about it, do you think that it's harmless? Do you think it's perfectly fine?
Right.
If people did that for like things that you do, would you just be like, yeah, this is great? And for how long would you be willing to be like, yeah, this is great?
Right. And that's the hard thing to relate to a naturally born white male. Because how many offensive jokes do you have? I mean, there's the White Claw joke. That's about it. Like, hey, bro, go crush a couple White Claws. And that's, I don't like White Claws because I'm white. And it's like, but that's what I'm saying. That's the joke, and it's
There's a couple of them that have like gained prevalence. White people don't know how to season food.
Oh, that's true.
It's a pretty common one.
Yeah, if anything, like I've seen more truth than anything, so it's not even a joke to me.
Yeah. Well, so even if it is true, it can still be a stereotype.
Very true. I'm a white man who likes to heavily season his food, and I suppose I could be offended by that.
Yeah. So it's not about like whether or not it's 100% true. It just has to be like kind of true, and like that's where it like gets its sort of wings, and then people like you or me who like actively like cook with different styles and seasonings depending on what we're making. We could easily get offended by that because we
if somebody used it maliciously, be like, oh, I'd love to come over for dinner, but you're white and I like to eat good food.
Sure.
I can see myself being offended by that. Yeah, so I get it.
All right, maybe not like seriously offended because as the Boondocks pointed out, ultimately we can always just be like, wait, I'm white. I don't care about any of this.
God, I love that scene. I loved all of
that. So I think that's always like kind of in our back pocket as white guys. We always like lean back into. Well, hold on now. I'm white.
I seen a post on Reddit the other day that was some black guy was bragging about like, oh, I've got a 6-car garage and this and that, and then some white guy's like, I've got like a 3-bedroom house and I don't need a 6-car garage, something like that. And the black guy's like, can you say the N-word? And the white guy's like, oh, look at this guy bragging about his one privilege. I've got so many privileges I can't count them.
Jesus Christ. That's brutal. Oh, god damn.
Oh yeah, back into it.
The actor who plays the main guy in the movie, he's actually in a bunch of comedy stuff. So it's a long-standing tradition in horror films to have like a comedy actor play like a character that's like in a horror movie, whether that be like the good character or the villainous character or whatever. It seems to want to come up like quite a bit.
Well, because it's like, I don't know, I guess that's relatable. Like a funny man is an everyman, just in at its core.
Sure.
It does remind me that the man who played Shaggy in all of those live-action Scooby-Doo movies was also in Scream. So that's fun.
It's actually really sad because he loves playing Shaggy. Like it's one of his favorite characters to get to play, and consistently he will offer himself up to play the character, and they will turn him down. Either because they need to pay him too much or some other reason. And it's just really sad because he takes it very personally. Like, he loves playing that character.
I thought he was a good Shaggy. I mean, those movies, I didn't enjoy the movies all that much, but it was not because of him.
What is it? James Gunn made those movies.
Was it?
Yeah. And that's why they're all about sex.
Yeah.
Like, those movies are sexy to a fault.
I mean, Scooby-Doo is a sexy show. Nothing but sex icons up in there.
Fair enough.
That dog? Mwah.
But they literally hired, like, Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Yes.
To play, what is it, Daphne?
Yep. And I don't know who played Velma, but she could get it.
She's one of my favorite actresses, and I get her, Linda Cardellini. Linda Cardellini, I adore that woman. She is the only reason I watched La Llorona. Or Ya Llorona, I can't remember. Hated that movie. Terrible film.
Oh, don't say that. We just had this conversation.
It does have redeeming qualities to it. Okay. It's not entirely awful, but I did not enjoy it. It was not for me. She, wonderful. The whole time. Just round of applause. Every time she comes on set, I'm just like, oh, there she is. Being fucking amazing. And then the guy that they had play, it was like Fred Savage or something, play Fred?
Yeah.
Was it Fred Savage? I can't remember who it was exactly. But he's like a very handsome man. And then the guy they had play Shaggy, again, gorgeous man, whose name
it was another one of those things where they really had to, through smart choice of wardrobe, make him look like a lanky idiot.
Yeah, yeah. He's also in SLC Punk, which I've talked to you about maybe doing for this podcast, actually.
Oh, that's right. I did see him in when I was Googling it.
Matthew Lillard, Linda Cardellini. God bless you. Yeah, Sarah Michelle and Freddie Prinze. Yeah, and then, Isla Fisher plays Mary Jane, the, like, female love interest for Shaggy in that film. There's actually a lot of, like, weird stuff for Scooby-Doo, like, franchise stuff that involves, like, romance and whatnot. There's, like, a whole Scooby-Doo, like, animated.
The newer one where it's him and Velma?
Yeah, like from the very beginning of the show, him and Velma are in a committed relationship with each other. And
Which, I mean, good for them. I always ship that in my head.
Yeah, I mean, it's a natural, like, solution there. But, like, it's just, like, really weird that is a choice that they made to do from the get-go.
To make a point of it in a children's animated TV series.
I do not believe that show was made for children at all.
All right.
No.
I mean, probably not.
It is animated, and I know that we have that, like, connotation in our head where it's like, if it's animated, it's for kids. But, like, there are so many... Like, there is a character who is voice acted by Linda Cardellini, which is really sad to think about, as I'm about to explain this character. There's a character who is one of the villain's daughter. They make fun of her because she smells bad. You know what they call her?
Smelly?
Hot dog water.
Ooh.
Yeah. I would take smelly over hot dog water every day of the week.
Yeah, that is rough.
Yeah. The fucked up part is, her dad, who's the villain of the episode that she's, like, kind of, like, fleshed out in.
Is he a hot dog demon?
He owns an amusement park, and in order to try to save money, they would use the hot dog water for everything, including showers and whatnot. So by calling her hot dog water, they were not only, like, finding an obtusely creative way to, like, say that this woman is funny, and that just seems malicious on its own, but also, like, they were
shitting on her upbringing.
They were shitting on her upbringing and the literal fact of it. Like, these things are funny if you just found, like, a creative way to make fun of someone.
If that was a funny way to describe how somebody smelled and they didn't shower in hot dog water.
Yeah, that's fine. But, like, when that's the fact, you're just being mean about
literally shitting
situation.
on somebody's actual life.
Yeah, like, that's a terrible situation that she's in. And for the record, there is a season in which Hot Dog Water joins the team because Velma leaves for a couple of episodes, and they change the opening theme to include
Hot Dog Water.
Her in the theme. And the theme has, like, the character arrive, and then the name is in kind of the background, and it says Hot Dog Water.
The poor woman.
Yeah, and in the credits, when the credits roll, because
it's Hot Dog Water?
It's Hot Dog Water. And it says Hot Dog Water, played by Linda Cardellini. So the voice of an angel, just the most gorgeous voice you've ever heard, on this really sad character who, like, I pray to God children do not watch this show and think,
that's a funny name to call somebody.
Because I think the big takeaway...
I heard this, by the way, funny you should mention it. In my friend group, I forget how it came up, but it occurs to me now that they use that phrase, hot dog water, today. Now I gotta, like, really think hard about how that came up.
I don't think kids would take away the fact that, like, you should not be calling people hyper-specific, potentially true fucked up names.
Right.
I don't know if that's, like, what they were trying to, like, say.
I mean, yeah, they were probably just trying to make it really funny. Which, I mean, it was funny.
Certainly, yes.
But I don't think any kid's gonna go like, hey, you smell like you have too many dogs at your house. And he's like, yeah, I do.
I do. Is 7 too much? Like, yes. Yeah, 7's right at that number. How big's your house? Not very, we're incredibly poor. Most of the dogs aren't even ours, we just let them in. Yeah, so, well, I think we have enough here that we can cut out some of the not necessary stuff.
Oh man, the next episode, I'm gonna be Too Many Dogs Thompson.
Too Many Dogs Thompson seems great. Alright, let's hop into the movie and we will be back shortly. And we are back, from just having finished watching Creep. It does kind of end right at that 1 hour and 15 minute mark, which excites me. I just love those sort of clean, that's exciting. But you were just talking, and I feel like you're ripped and ready to go. You were saying that this is sort of a middle ground film for you. What do you mean by that?
So, I generally dislike horror because, and we've talked about that on the side about how Blumhouse invented jump scares, and jump scares piss me right the fuck off because it's cheap and it requires nothing, and it's like it's insulting to the time that I give the movie that's how they're gonna scare me is with a jump scare. So this movie, actual horrific elements, real deep felt horror that I appreciated, definitely felt, but they also jump scared like 5 times in the movie. And I couldn't really it was a joke, but it's a horror movie, and they use jump scares, and by nature that makes me angry.
So, for the record, Blumhouse did not invent jump scares. They are sort of the...
accredited with it?
No, they are the very modern, like, They are the people who, in modern horror films, have created this idea amongst people that jump scares are just like a thing in horror. Horror
jump
films.
Scare equal horror.
Yeah. And they very much do the thing. This film did it, in fact, where they kind of end on a jump scare. I think the movie is kind of trying to say that it is having a difficult time deciding between like true horror and like these jump scare horrors, because the movie does end on a jump scare note and then it stops and starts back up again, where the guy is like doing the thing again,
doing the deep felt horrific thing.
I can just do this again and get away with it. That's deep horror. And also, he shows, without saying, he shows you that he has done this a lot.
That he has done it a lot, is currently in the process of doing it again, that it's a romantic thing to him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, we think of serial killers, or maybe we don't, but I have this idea that the populace has an idea that serial killers are this maniacal thing that, like, I must kill, I can only feel good by being evil. But I mean, the people with actual mental dysfunction that causes them to kill are not doing that because they're nobody is evil for the sake of being evil.
Yeah, I mean, even incredibly rare.
Yeah, I mean, and even in movies, like, the best villains are the ones who are...
They think they're the good guy.
They think they're the good guy. And so this guy romantically cataloging his past loves is a horrific thing when you know that he's killed them all.
Yeah, and for him to, like, he specifically says that Aaron was the best person who ever lived.
You'll always be my favorite of them all.
Yeah. He says that, and the thing is he's found his favorite person, the person that he thinks is the best who ever lived, and he's still going and finding someone else too. And I don't know if that's like a commentary on romance and the nature of like relationships, or if it is a commentary on like people who have like a mental health problem like this, and it'll never be enough. You got to just keep doing it,
I mean, maybe it doesn't tie into. I mean, it could be talking about drug problems, because that's the through line to that, is you're always chasing that.
Sure,
and so maybe of sorts. That's the perfect word for it, because he's hit the optimal high. He's hit that mainline heroin dose that does it for him. But he's got to get it again.
Sure. On that note, there is a point in the film where so let me ask you this. Was there a point in the film where you were certain that this Joseph character, the sort of the villain of the movie, was definitely a killer or someone dangerous, someone that's going to like hurt this individual?
I'm trying hard to think back before that first time where he's blocking the door with the mask, because at that point, like, I knew that this was going to end badly. Like, there was no redeeming factor of it. But I'm trying to think before that. That was the most cut and dry moment right there. I'm sure there were telling signs beforehand. Especially, I think I brought up that very menacing scene up the staircase where he's silhouetted by the lights behind him.
Sure, when he
and it's got
him,
that. It demands that he comes in. That was hardly an invite. That was probably the point where I was like, oh, this man is evil, or he's painted to be so.
So what is the difference between an invitation and a trap?
Well, I mean, it's not so much that it was a trap. Like,
I mean, it kind of was. He stole his keys.
Oh, I mean, it was a trap, but I mean, it wasn't. That's not the dichotomy that I'm suggesting at when I said it wasn't an invitation. It was, he very much already had it in his mind that he was going to get this man in his house, and the pushing of it. But I was going to offer you a whiskey. No, I really got to go home, but we're right here. We're at the top of the stairs. Baby, it's cold outside. It's literally that.
It's not that long of a drive home. It's only 20 minutes.
20 minutes, and you can just coast down the hill, and how hard would it be to give an old, poor, dying man a glass of whiskey?
Yeah, and then later, when Aaron is trying to leave, he's telling him, oh no, you shouldn't leave. It's such a long drive back. He specifically points out how long the drive is.
Yep, it's a little treacherous at night.
And it was already nighttime, in the original discussion. But for me, so the scene that you're describing where he's blocking the door, that scene did nothing for me in terms of like proving that he's a villainous, dangerous individual. He had been drugged. He had been mixing alcohol with whatever drug the person gave him. He didn't know that. The guy found out just recently that he had mental health problems. And, like, admittedly, he found out he had mental health problems after drugging him. So that's, you're a little bit past the point of no return at that point.
I mean, he was also told by who I would assume, I'm going to just, for the sake of it, say that the sister on the phone was telling the truth.
Sure.
Because I have no reason to not believe that.
That is one of the few points where I think most people would agree that's pretty believable.
Yeah, I mean, because if we're talking about like a character that has a stake in something, like he's had a stake in lying this whole time, who has a stake in unraveling that lie and calling the phone and being like, you need to get out of that house, you need to just walk away, like nobody. I'm just going to assume that that's...
And it does very much seem like he caught him off guard when he says, I know, I talked to Angela.
Oh, he fled at that point, which is why the putting on of a mask.
Sure.
To tie it back to like my own personal like experiences, I remember having problems like speaking publicly or in front of people at all.
Sure.
And sunglasses help.
Yeah.
And maybe it's that divider between you and them. Maybe it's the actual act of putting on a mask. But he fled like a prey would, and then puts on a wolf mask and then decides to act menacing. I thought he was dangerous in that point because he tried to be.
Yeah, so in my mind, though, it was, at this point, Aaron is to blame. This isn't inherently Joseph's fault.
No, for sure. I mean, it definitely, Aaron led to that.
Yeah, so in my mind, I wasn't thinking, like, even if Joseph did, let's say Joseph kills Aaron right then and there.
Okay.
I wouldn't necessarily blame Joseph for that. I think very much, even in a court of law, he could be like, I don't know what was happening. I had a few drinks with the guy. I passed out almost immediately. I normally have much more tolerance for alcohol than that. Found out later I found this empty bottle of drugs. I must have killed him while I was, drugged out. I don't know what happened. I think in a court of law, that would fly.
Oh, 100%. I don't think the court of law is how we determine morality.
Sure.
But yeah, I get what you're getting
What I'm saying is, at this point in the film, I can understand if Aaron is still thinking, hey, this guy hasn't done anything wrong yet. He's just a weird dude. Not like a threat or like someone who's trying to actually threaten me. I've sort of like,
he has pushed it.
Yeah, I've pushed it to this point now. This is my fault, right? The predicament I'm in. And up till now, really, it has been mostly just kind of atypical types of socialization stuff. Like, he's just socially awkward, and that's weird, but not like threatening, The like jump scare stuff is like, I really think this movie, I like that the jump scares are in it, like especially in the first sort of like half of it before we start getting into the more like intense, like scary jump scares, when it's just like jump scares because he's trying to be wacky and fun. I think that is a great way of showing like his misunderstanding of social like norms. He thinks this is just like social fun stuff, but we know as like, everymen that if we were in Aaron's position, we would see this as kind of threatening. Because, I'm out here, I'm out all by myself, I'm out in the middle of nowhere, I don't know you, and you're just jumping out of nowhere to try and scare me, and that might be your type of, like, humor with, whoever, but you need to recognize that this is a different situation where you need to be a little bit more sensitive to the fact that this is, like, more scary than it has any right to be.
Right.
I like that. I like that a lot in the movie, and I think that the movie would potentially be even better if there were no like real horror aspects of it. It was just a guy being kind of weird, and that's scary sometimes. But like ultimately, if the movie was framed just a little bit differently as like a sort of uplifting story of friendship, it could be like a sort of good fake out movie for like, hey, for the first half of it, we kind of think it's scary, and then this guy like runs away and is like really frightened and drugs a dude, which like we kind of gloss over that in the film, but like that is a horrible thing he did to that man.
Well, I brought that up because like it really makes me wonder what the character of Aaron is, like who he is as a person, like, and I'm not saying this is like one of those Dexter things where it's like, oh, he's killing bad people, but yeah, in the beginning of the movie he talks about not knowing who the person on the other end of this line is, so I guess he never called this person because he's maybe just responded by email and was like, oh, maybe it's a hot piece looking for a rub down and they'll pay me for it. Ha-cha-cha-cha. But he brings the method to drug somebody to this expected scenario. And that's horrible on its own.
I think the way you're reading it is appropriate, but there is like a good argument to be made that like he could just have those drugs for himself, like for his own.
He just happens to have Benadryl on, despite not having. Benadryl isn't something you have unless you're sick. I've carried spare ibuprofen in case I get a headache. I've never carried spare Benadryl in case I get a sudden onset flu.
I'm just saying, it's not completely outside of the, world of possibility here, it wouldn't be entirely, maybe he got the drugs on his way up there, that was part of, the shit he was doing that day, just going by the CVS or whatever. I'm going to pick up my Benadryl because, I just started some new medication. I got to pick it up and I'm going to go do this thing and then I'm going to go back home and try it for the first time tonight. Maybe. I don't know. I obviously think that if that was something that the filmmakers were trying to say, they would have specifically went out of their way to say that. It's one of those things that's just ambiguous enough for me to be like, maybe Aaron isn't such a terrible person that he would bring knockout drugs to maybe there'll be a sexy lady when I get there kind of situation.
I mean, that is 100% how I read it, is all I'm saying.
I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying that for me,
it's a very hard stretch to write it off as, I don't know what the word here is,
completely benign.
Benign, yeah. Just a thing that he would have and know to do.
Yeah. I think that's perfectly reasonable too. I think that this is one of those details of the movie that they specifically don't go over because they kind of want us to think about it this way, where it's well, it could be fine, or it could be Aaron's a little more fucked up than we're giving him credit for. Specifically, one of the aspects of Aaron that I think the movie doesn't go over is how lonely Aaron is. It seems like Aaron really doesn't have any friends either. He doesn't call anyone or tell anyone or have anybody over to watch the house while he's sleeping. That shit was happening to me, man. I would be hitting up all my boys and all my friends and everybody I know and just being like, hey, can you
We would be sleeping in shifts, 100%. Or absolutely. I wouldn't be sleeping at home.
Yeah, I would go to somebody else's house. Yeah, I do not know why Aaron is complete, other than he is also a very lonely man and has nobody, and potentially also a very bad man himself. So there's something there that specifically the movie is glossing over. Movies have a way of obscuring the things they want to obscure and highlighting the things they want to highlight. And I think that is specifically one of the things.
One of those things that just for the sake of the plot, we're going to assume that the Benadryl was there for benign reasons and he just happened to know that he could drug the scary man.
Well, they do that a lot in film where they're just kind of and I had knockout drugs on me because it's interesting at all that they would even note what drug it was specifically. That's kind of odd, right?
Well,
most films just leave it ambiguous.
You know what? For that case, now that you do mention it, the fact that they bring up that it was Benadryl and not straight up the date rape drug is
Rohypnol.
Rohypnol, yes.
Yeah, because they could have said that.
He could have said, "Hey, I found the roofies." He could have said anything, but he actually found Benadryl, which frankly I've never heard of being used to drug somebody. So I mean, I guess it could be. It's more benign than if he did have Rohypnol.
Yeah. If they had specifically said you used Oxycontin or you used something that has a more dark connotation to it,
right?
But they used Benadryl, which to my knowledge is pretty benign. That would be.
It's an antihistamine, isn't it?
I'm unfamiliar.
I'm pretty sure Benadryl's an antihistamine. Which again, did he say Benadryl or Robitussin?
He said Benadryl.
He said Benadryl.
Yeah.
All right. I think I'm reading too much into it then.
That's okay. That's okay.
Because I do think Benadryl's an antihistamine, and I'd never heard of an antihistamine knocking somebody out.
Well, maybe when mixed with,
anything when mixed with alcohol definitely has adverse effects.
And the guy is mentally unwell, so there's something there maybe, I don't know.
For sure.
That's another thing that I think that my favorite thing about Creep as a movie is its potential to be a discussion on how we treat people with what's the word? Not asymptomatic, but with mental health issues, that is kind of my favorite part of the movie is that first half where you're not really sure and he just seems kind of weird, but
very off. I mentioned at some point where if I didn't know going into this that this was a horror movie, or if I didn't know that the name was Creep, or because Creep itself, whatever.
Yeah.
Going into that, I'd really like to know if I would have had the same feeling of dread when these strange things started, when his weird behavior started popping up.
I do think that the feeling that you have of this is when it started to shift for me is right around where the movie is trying to have you have those feelings. This is where you're kind of supposed to start thinking hey,
this is full on a bad movie.
Yeah, this is about someone doing something nefarious. But I still think that going well into it, maybe at the point when he had his address and he had no reason to have the address, I think that's when I would start to be concerned. But up until then, I think even in the darker parts, it's sort of like excusable in a way. Like, you know, you misplaced your keys. Was that you? Was that him? Who's to say?
I was concerned about that because in the film, leaving things very ambiguous, Joseph drove them there. We don't know who drove them back. I would imagine it would be Joseph because this is a part of town that Aaron's not familiar with.
Sure.
So Joseph should have had the keys, but we don't know that because he says they're in your pocket, and he says, I thought they were in my pocket. So did he say I put them in your pocket and hucked him in the fucking woods? We don't know.
One thing I did want to bring up, are you familiar with the concept of love bombing?
You've mentioned it before, and I couldn't tell you the exact description, but I get the idea.
So yeah, basically it's when, in order to try to like...
gain somebody's trust?
Yeah, gain someone's trust or like save a relationship or something like that. You sort of just shower them with like overly affectionate, overly loving type of vernacular or type of...
Do you think that's what was happening here when he was like, how kind you are, the kindest person I've ever met?
I think he was very much... It's kind of like grooming, right? You're kind of like trying to convince them that like... this is a happy and loving and sweet like environment, and like look how kind I am to you, and like how willing I am to note your worth and all these other things. He also like moves in for the hug like immediately. You know, he wants that hug like right then and there. Oh, by the end of the day this is gonna be normal, so let's just go ahead and do it right now. And like you've heard that before, right? But you never really thought about it. And when someone says something like that to you, if you don't want a hug, you should just be like, nah, don't.
Right.
But then you're the weirdo, right? It's not them being weird. You're being weird because somebody just wanted a hug and you're saying no.
The offering of affection should be, I mean, really should be the normal part of it, and denying affection should be the weird part of it, but that isn't how it is. I've definitely met people who are, my mom's not a hugger, and I've had girlfriends that are like, oh, so nice to meet you, and going for the hug, and she's just, no, don't fucking touch me. That should be normal.
That should be, I agree, yeah. I think it's very odd that in our current state of affairs, like, having a preference or having a boundary, you know, you can absolutely have a preference and be like, I'd rather if we hugged instead of shook hands. You should totally express that if that's how you feel. But you should also be willing to accept that the other person has a right to express, oh no, I'd rather not. That should be equal. Like, both of those should be equally normal, right? Because you're just being honest with a person about what your needs are, and everybody should always be doing that all the time.
It really should be the default to not be touching me. Did you watch Mr. Robot, the TV show? With Rami Malek?
Yeah, I've seen that.
There's some part in one of the earlier episodes where he's working at whatever actual company he's working at, you know, sure. Head honcho goes to pat him on the shoulder, and I've definitely felt that. Like, I work with a boss right now who thinks it's really kosher to come up behind you and do the really aggressive shoulder rub, and I'm like, don't do that to me.
Yeah, I have a guy, that guy in my class I was telling you about that I had over. He fucking does that to me a lot, and I don't. And it would be one thing if he was like, "Hey, Caleb, I'm right behind you, buddy," or like something.
Or like started off with the back pat and then started with the shoulder pat, and then it's like, "Hey, you're beginning to cross the line." But for somebody to go into like, "Hey, new employee, here's a fucking rough back rub," that's a weird. I don't know where that comes from societally.
Yeah, dude. Like, I don't know, man. I try not to be touching people unless I know that that's like perfectly okay. You know, and I don't ask because I don't want to like impose that on them.
Frankly, I don't want to be touching people.
Yeah, I mean, that's perfectly fine too. I think that like, you know, there are times when I'm more okay with it than others. You know, even when there's someone where I think like, oh, you know, a hug would be nice. You know, I don't you know, ask for it because I think that there is something to be said when you like, you know, in that scene where he's like, well, come on in, I was gonna offer you a whiskey, that kind of stuff, where you like, it sounds like you're giving them a choice, but in reality you're kind of not. Right. And I think that that's like, there's something there, and I don't know if the movie does a great job of talking about it, but it does bring it up every now and again, where it's like that feeling like you're not paralyzed because you're still making action towards the thing the person is like pushing you towards. So it's like the opposite of paralyzed, like you're hypnotized, really. It's
almost like a peer pressure thing, really, where how dare you not? Like, and there's things that are normalized, like if somebody reaches out their hand for a handshake, you shake their hand. That's a fairly normal and middle ground to be having. But like, how much further than that is weird? You know, there's the different handshakes, there's the aggressive, and they grab your shoulder, and that's supposed to be a power play. Not shoulder, elbow.
Yeah.
How far past that before the hug is weird, you know?
I think that even the handshake should be considered like pretty inappropriate as long as the person is like, you know, like, I think it should be inappropriate enough for you to be able to say, I'd rather not, and then not be like, oh, you think I'm an asshole or something? You think because like that's
because that's what it is. Because you know, it's one thing to say because we can come back and be like, all right, they don't like to hug people, and we can get past that. But to turn down a handshake is, I mean, culturally disrespectful.
Yeah, and it shouldn't be. It should very much just be like okay, yeah, you have your boundaries. You don't want to do that, absolutely, because you don't know. You don't know what somebody has like gone through.
Somebody's got eczema and they don't like.
Or even to take it to a more benign place. Maybe they just have bad experiences with handshakes. Maybe somebody like squeezes their hand too hard, or that's like. I think that's a very common thing, and people just don't talk about it because, like, okay, you're a guy, right? Somebody shakes your hand and hurts your hand when they do it. Do you tell anyone?
Right. No. You don't even say it in the moment.
Yeah, you don't say it in the moment. You don't tell people later. You don't, like, go home to your loving wife and kids and tell them about it. You just sit on that. And you can't even, next time that person goes to shake your hand, you don't even say, like, oh, hey, could you go a little lighter? Or I'd rather not shake your hand or anything like that. You just have to sit on it again. Yeah, I think the movie sort of talks about those kinds of things, and it talks about the whole like social expectations, sort of being like coerced into doing things without like being directly said like you have to. It's the first time in the movie where he's like pushed into a situation where he kind of has to do something is in that scene that you were like, this is when he's dangerous, when he's like cornered or he's sort of like blocking the door. That's when, that's the first time he's being told, like, no, I'm gonna...
A hard line, no, and not even just the coercion that happens very shortly beforehand.
Yeah. There's, like, a ton of coercion throughout the film, and a ton of that, like my favorite is the love bombing, though, the constant hyper-affection stuff, and that's the stuff that he ends up using at the end to kill him, is to the hyper-affectionate, like, hey, I'm lonely, and... I think that you're going to have that massive kindness to really support me through this like tough time in my life. He's love bombing you. He's like showing you that he can see your worth and that you can, that he trusts you and all this other stuff. And like some people really do fall for that. And I think it's so good that it's like specifically two men in this situation, because a lot of times when we think about these types of things, we think, well, that'll never happen to guys, So if it was like,
not even like two men in a gay relationship either.
Yeah.
Although I'm sure something could be said for that.
Yeah, I'm sure there's like a
with the heart pendants and all that, and but yeah, for it to be at the very end, he goes there like purely out of kindness, purely like, but look how sad he is, which maybe speaks to how well he'd been groomed at that point. Because I mean, at no point during all of that stuff would I have thought like, he's just misunderstood. No, I would have showed up with police, or I would not have sat in that. And he brings it up when he's going over, when Joseph's bringing it over. He's like, I don't know why he didn't stand up. And I agree. Like, at several points during this movie, the spatial awareness and the self-preservation of Aaron is just so tossed back and forth. He's got the presence of mind to roofie a guy, but not to bring a knife from the kitchen downstairs with the madman that he's... And to show up and not just sit there tensely waiting for this man to show up, but to sit there and cross his leg and lean back on the bench in a situation that should have very much been tense.
So let me ask you this. Do you think that the movie changes at all if Aaron is a woman? You can even keep the same name.
Oh, you can.
Yeah.
I'm sure it does to some... Like, are you talking about what it might be speaking to? Sure. Thematically or something?
You can take it that way, or you could just say like how you would have felt about the various scenes. Like, if she was a woman, I feel like I especially am affected by that pretty easily. Like, the feeling that like she's in especially a more dangerous situation because she's a woman and he's
less physically capable.
Well, no, not that. Just that like this is a situation I see play out a lot.
For sure.
Where women kind of get into situations with guys where they're willing to be a lot more trusting because, they want to be able to support them and be friendly and kind. And women are always telling stories about things that they like did where they were just like, well, I didn't want to be rude, so I didn't.
Well, that's exactly it. Like, there's this mindset that women have to think about these things. So it's like this idea of oppression because, oh, well, I didn't do anything to this woman. It's like, no, but because she was going out with a strange man, she had to be on guard, as opposed to a man doesn't necessarily have to.
Sure.
So I'm sure there's something to be said for that stuff, and I definitely would have probably been less believing of how trusting Aaron was.
Sure.
If he was a woman. Is there anything in this movie to be said if Joseph was a woman? Like, is there something there? Or am I just like, well, tit for tat?
Well, so, I don't know. There's certainly something there, but
maybe like, something about Aaron being more trusting of a woman telling him to come up for a drink? I mean, fuck, he was planning on showing up to having a drink with a woman.
Yeah, I mean, so unfortunately there are not a whole lot of movies where like the woman is put in the position of power over the man, which would certainly make this movie a little bit more unique and interesting, you know. Even in the movie, like one of the best movies where like the woman is specifically like the killer character.
It's usually done with like the honeypot facade.
Yes, where like it's well, so the honeypot facade, and then even the like twist ending kind of thing is also pretty common. Friday the 13th comes to mind, you know, where it turns out it was Jason's mom the whole time.
Right.
And, like, that's cool, but it would be a lot nicer if Jason's mom was, like, an active character throughout the film, like, constantly interacting with the people she was killing and whatnot. But she's not. She's kind of this twist-ending villain, sort of. And I think that, like, having the female villain sort of, like, front and center, and it's just this, like, it's very much this sort of, like, character back and forth between her and her victim, kind of. It would be a very unique film, certainly. We don't get a whole lot of those. To say, like, what it means thematically, however, I don't know. I kind of love the idea, to be honest. I think I'm just a little too in love with it. I just keep thinking, like, this would be such, like, a cool, like, female empowerment sort of thing, even if it's, like, really, you know...
You too can be a serial killer.
Yeah, villainous and awful. And, like, also how, like, when someone is atypical, basically, the word I was looking for was atypical, not asymptomatic. I said asymptomatic, I meant atypical. So, like, when someone is atypical, you know, socially or, like, mentally or physically or whatever, you know, they're not the standard, right? Maybe in a benign way or, you know, maybe even in a dangerous way, you know. When it's a woman, oftentimes people are willing to overlook it more than if it's a man. I think there would be something to be said there, maybe. Like, that's why Erin is so, like...
So trusting, because...
You know, oh, she's a woman and she's, you know, atypical mentally, and so that's why I'm willing to go back and forgive...
How quirky instead of how strange.
Yeah, like, that is, like, a very common movie trope, the Manic Pixie Dream Girl, where she's, like, clearly, like, her mental or social health isn't exactly perfect, and, like, that's seen as, like, a cool bonus. You know, wow, she's making me look at the world in a different lens instead of like, man, interacting and hanging out with this person is like really taxing and like it's difficult and like hard. And if they were a guy, you know, if it was a guy friend, like, what is it? Yes Man, you know, Jim Carrey and
Zooey Deschanel.
Yeah, that beautiful doe-eyed girl. Yeah, Zooey Deschanel. She is very much painted up to be this like quirky and fun character, but she is also very socially awkward and kind of weird. And instead of being like, you know, instead of Jim Carrey like losing his patience with her and being like, okay, you're kind of fucking annoying, right? He's very tolerant of her. And I think that if she was a dude, this beautiful doe-eyed man, I'm sure Jim Carrey at some point would be like, I'm not interested in you romantically or sexually, so I'm not willing to put up with all this crap. I do like these like sort of little experiments of like, hey, what if the genders were swapped? How would that, you know, affect the film? You know?
It reminds me a little... Did you ever watch Seinfeld?
Yeah.
So Elaine's boyfriend, during a certain section of it, I forget, he's got a really iconic voice and I can't think of anything he's in.
That's alright.
Just that guy, where he was the big stupid guy. Like, he gets this jacket and he's like, he's showing it off and it's got a big 8-ball on the back and he's like, get any questions? You ask the 8-ball. And it's like... and he's the Zooey Deschanel in this situation. But because he's big hunky man, it's like, all right, he's a fucking idiot. We got to ditch this man somehow.
Sure. Yeah. It's oftentimes, you know, mental and social, like, atypical behavior is oftentimes seen as something that needs to be, like, fixed or escaped, like, run away from it, you know? It's rarely ever looked at as, like, wow, it is so cool that this guy, like, tries to do jump scares in real life to keep things exciting and fun, you know? It's, like... a scary thing, and it's this horrible thing. And in the context of the film, yes, it is scary. But, like, let's imagine this was supposed to be, like... Let's imagine it was the movie I was describing, where it's supposed to be, like, this uplifting story of this guy learning to, like, you know, have a good friendship with another guy who's just a little bit quirkier, a little weirder, a little more socially awkward, you know? I still think that all of those scenes where he does jump scares would be seen as scary, even in that, like, uplifting, sort of, like, heartfelt film that I'm describing. And they would be seen as something either to, like, avoid or to fix. Like, he needs to stop doing that or do it in a different way or something. When in reality, like, yeah, I get that jump scares aren't for everybody, but, like, you shouldn't be making friends with people who don't like the shit that you do. So, like, it should be something that you're kind of like, hey, this is a thing I do. Do you like it? optimally, people should be trying to find a way to like it as if it were Zooey Deschanel's beautiful doe eyes and her quirky feelings about various foods and other things. Whatever Yes Man is about. Jesus Christ. I really don't like Jim Carrey movies all that much, so I kind of tend to forget them. But I feel a lot of like feelings for the main character, Creep Joseph. You know, I feel really sorry for him, man. Like, that's got to be tough. You know, in the first half.
In the first half, right? No, I'm just I'm trying to limit my exposure to that idea as being like, oh, it's gonna be really tough being a serial killer. Yeah. So like, how's he ever gonna find love?
I think that the movie does do the thing where it's talking about a very real thing that people experience, where they're like, you know,
I'm different and alone, and like, how do you fix that and still be you?
And I think that lying and like trying to like create a narrative that's like, you know, more palatable for people, I think that seems like a really logical answer for a lot of people in this situation. You know, I don't think it's ethical. I don't think it's the right thing to do, but I do think it's like
a snap decision that many people probably take.
Even if it's not a snap decision, if it's something that you like really planned for and you created this really cool story that's kind of believable, you know, like it seems like Joseph did, I still think that there's something reasonable about that, especially for someone as like emotionally articulate as Joseph is. Like, Joseph is able to explain like, hey, this happened and it hurt me and I didn't like it, but I did this and that was wrong as well. And like, he is clearly able, he is very like emotionally intelligent and emotionally like...
You don't think any of that was like for the sake of manipulation?
I do think that is the case, yes. I think anytime you like lie to someone, create a narrative, something like that, even if it is for the sake of like, I'm lonely and I'm trying to make friends and then everything else doesn't work, and anytime I'm like honest with them, they're just like, oh, you have what mental health problems? You're bipolar and schizophrenic and like, oh, that's too much for me. I'm just never going to put up with you outside of this one interaction we're having right now. You know, even with that in mind, it's still manipulation. It's still shitty to do.
But he was at least like fluent enough to like express something convincing.
Yeah,
is what you're trying to say.
Well, what I'm trying to say is that like, if we were to separate the first half of the movie and the second half of the movie, you know, that first half is a very reasonable thing, I think.
There were definitely points through that where I was like, this very weird thing he did, but then explained away in a very rational way.
Yeah, I took
like,
pictures
totally
of
makes
you
sense.
when you showed up, and like, I kind of stalked you a little as you were first arriving, and like, I did that because I was scared, and I was worried that you were some kind of like mean weirdo, and you were gonna get pissed off if I didn't show up right away.
I knew you before you knew me.
You didn't do that, and I decided to trust you because you didn't freak out, and you know, that's super normal and like not that crazy sounding. Like, yeah, you know, maybe the pictures were a little weird, and you know, certainly being like so upfront and honest about it is a little weird for some people. Like, some people, anytime you're like, hey, just to be perfectly honest with you, when I first met you, you reminded me of my dad, and you just kind of look a lot like him, and when we started talking, I was a little aggressive with you initially, and like, you know, I could tell you didn't like that, and to be honest, like, it felt a little unfair to me too, so I tried to tone it down a little, and the more I toned it down, the nicer you got, and I started feeling a little safe. Like, you know, when you really explain something to someone, it's one of two reactions, basically. They're either going to be like, thank you for fully explaining that. Now I totally
Now I understand why everything was so strange.
Yeah. Or they're going to be like, you're a fucking freak. How dare you fully articulate exactly what you were feeling and exactly what you were doing, and like all of these like little minutiae of what was happening in that moment. People are really, really like quick to be aggressive about that kind of stuff, and it seems unfair because you're doing the right thing. That is exactly what you should do. In any given situation where there's a misunderstanding, you should try your hardest to like really articulate beat for beat what happened, like both emotionally and literally. And people don't take it well, man. They really don't. So it's unfortunate. And I think people are getting better about it. I think they are. That is one of the parts of his character in the first half of the movie that I think makes him really convincing, is like those really honest moments where he's just like, I did this thing and it was not cool, or I felt this way about it, or I thought this, or, you know, whatever. I think all the moments that are really scary are kind of the moments where he's just sort of like, no, it's fine. Don't think about it too much. So whenever he's like obfuscating things, I think that's what makes this movie really cool, is the parts of it where like we get to get into this discussion of like, what was the like thing that made you...
Where was the line where you were like not willing to write things off as him being a weirdo?
Yeah.
Like, when did you actually think that this was serial killer status?
And then when did he like pull you back to thinking, no, this is just a kind of a weird dude? I think that's when this movie's at its best, is when it's like discussing that dichotomy or making you think of that, like that sort of thing. So you saw that there is a Creep 2. Tell me what your Creep 2 is about.
Clearly, he just does it again. I mean, he's on the phone at the end of this one.
It just picks
setting up the next one.
Right where Creep 1 ends.
Just the same damn thing. It would be cool if we explored that sister character a little bit more, or if, like, Creep 2 was some sort of prequel. I'm also really concerned about the fact that, like, to tell a convincing lie, generally there's hints of truth. Why did he use his sister's name as his wife and then do this whole... I think he raped his sister. I think that's a thing that happened, and maybe Creep 2 is a prequel to when that happened with the fucking Peach Fuzz mask, and that's what I'd like it to be.
Sure. With that in mind, why did the sister call? If, like, she's his...
That's another... I mean, I have no idea. This is another thing that was sort of taken in its own bubble. Like, why does he have ibuprofen? Why does his sister call and say, get out of the house? It's just something that I've kind of taken. Why did she call? Is this, like, the nightly checkup?
I mean, I think that they probably have a perfectly healthy relationship, and she calls to make sure that her mentally unwell brother isn't getting into any trouble, as he probably has in the past. She seems, like, relatively familiar with his tactics, at least enough to say, like, hey, you're not really in any danger, just go ahead and leave the house and, like, start heading out. You can't get in your car. Okay, well, tell me where you are, and then just start walking towards the road.
What if it's, like, an enabling thing? Like, what if the sister's also kind of fucked up? Because, I mean... For him to have done this, as long as he has in the past, what keyed the sister off that he was mentally unwell in a way that people would not be safe around him?
Well, hold on. She does say that, like, he is safe. Like, he's gonna be fine.
As long as he leaves the house now.
Yeah. He's... Well, I think that's because she's, like, concerned that maybe in the past he's broken into houses that he wasn't supposed to be in. Like, that is a thing that people who are mentally unwell sometimes do, you know? Like,
okay.
It wouldn't be outside of the realm of possibility if he's murdering people for him to break into a house and claim that it's his, you know? Or something else, you know? Like, some other, you know, thing. It could very well be that she is ignorant and that she just thinks this is a benign thing. It could also be that she's in on it, which I think would make for a wonderful Creep 2. And then there are literally... 2 creeps.
This has to be how the movie goes, and I'm going to be really upset now.
It's they do like the
Creep 3, they have a kid, 3 creeps.
With the sister?
Clear. I said that he was raping her in the beginning, alright? We can only hope that it's consensual and they have a kid.
Sure, yeah. I mean, the whole I raped my sister thing is like, you know, that could have just been, the rape was the fictitious part of the story. Everything else was accurate as hell. That's exactly just how they get down. Yeah. I don't know if I take it that way. I do think that just a whole ton of this is like just pure fabrication for him.
There's also like, there has to be, I don't want to say suspension of disbelief because that's just, I feel like that's a phrase that gets used a lot, but like, I feel like there's things that for the sake of the movie plot going forward, much like the Benadryl, like just have to be accepted. So yeah, I mean, I didn't even really think about like, why did the sister call? What are the sister's motives? What does the sister know about the brother? That's just, hey, you should probably leave. Because otherwise, I mean, how does that scene progress? Does he try to find the keys, not find the keys?
I think certainly they had kind of written themselves into a situation where either he was going to go through the guy's pockets and find the keys, or he wasn't going to, and then
what? Right.
Yeah, so like, I guess they could have had the guy wake up again and like be like, oh, hey, you're looking for your keys in my pockets, you don't trust me, I'm mad at you, scary, scary, which just kind of feels like more of the same. I think the sister thing is like strictly more interesting, and it adds like an element to the movie that wasn't there previously, but by adding the aspect that he is mentally unwell, it does add a lot to the film that doesn't seem like stuff that the movie's trying to talk about, really. I think the movie still does talk about like him being socially awkward without him being mentally awkward or mentally unwell or whatever. That didn't need to be there for us to have all these conversations about, like, what about people who just have different social norms than you know? The movie doesn't seem to want to talk about mental unwellness, but it did add it in as an aspect in the sister phone call scene. I don't know if it's a perfect solution to the problem we find ourselves in where the guy has knocked the dude out and now is rifling through his pockets.
That whole situation does seem like they were trying to stitch 2 halves of something together.
Sure.
I don't know. I'm not unhappy with it either. It's just that the more I think about it, the more things don't add up. As a person who would see themselves in this situation, things don't add up.
Yeah, this does seem like one of the more flimsier like plot points of the film, where it's like You know, okay, so you've
And
decided...
then what happened to the phone? She had perfect reception, and then it garbles out. Like, why?
Yeah, that also seems a little odd. That was the part of it that, like, I just accept to be, like, a movie trope where it's, like, right when you need to be on the phone with somebody in a horror movie, it starts getting all garbly for no reason.
Right.
Sure, fine. And, like, I've certainly experienced that where I'm, like, walking around and people are like, I can't hear you, what's going on? And, you know, I have to, like, get somewhere where I have better reception. But, like, it just seems a little convenient that she's given you all the information you could possibly want, and then once you're like, okay, save me now, she's like,
Right.
Cool. Cool. Thank you, horror film. I forgot I was in a horror film. Thanks for reminding me.
The lady's literally on the other end going, I wish I could, but I can't.
Yeah. I'm sending in an attack helicopter to save you. What was that address you were going to give me again, sir? I'm sorry, I can't hear you. The phone must be getting all garbly. Yeah, like...
so yeah, all of that stuff, I'd be willing to accept it as, no. Like, the rest of the movie meant something. These are the things that we needed so we could get to the rest of the movie. And I'm totally willing to write stuff off like that. It's just like, I have to ask if it mattered, you know? The Benadryl and the not grabbing a knife and the sister, like, I'm gonna proceed from this point on assuming that they didn't really mean much.
Sure. Do you think that this movie is more or less what's the word, problematic? Let's use the word problematic. More or less problematic if we were to change it to be like let's say we just change the parts of the film after the part where they have a scuffle. Like, the scuffle happens, the screen goes blank, and then after that, we change everything to be like a story of forgiveness and uplifting. You know, hey, I'm gonna forgive you for, you know, being weird, and we're gonna be good friends, and everything's gonna be okay. And there's no horror elements after that. Do you think that the movie is more problematic that way or less problematic?
I'm not sure I'm understanding what you mean by problematic there.
So there's problematic readings of the film. Like, anybody who has a mental health issue, if you hang out with them after they've, like, had a bad day or treated you in an uncouth way, now they're going to murder you. That's one way to read the film, you know? Another way, let's say we were to make this other movie about the uplifting, hey, I'm sorry, or I forgive you for, you know, behaving uncouthly and, like, having, like, a bad, you know, evening, you know, after the drugging and the alcoholing, and now we have, like, an uplifting friendship and whatnot. To say that, like, hey, if you feel like someone is behaving in a way that is dangerous and is, like, frightening to you, you should just forgive them and hang out with them again anyways. Like, I think either way this movie ends, it is potentially, you could read it and be like, ooh, that's not great. Which one do you think is better? Which one do you think is worse?
I tend towards caution, and so I think it would be worse to have that be the message that got out, to be like, if somebody's behaving in a very odd way, that you think you should contact somebody and, like, have them be... Let's just say you feel like you should call the police because of how somebody's acting, but then you don't because that's the moral you took away from this movie. I think that's problematic.
Yeah, so certainly this movie does cover the police thing and does the thing that, like, horror movies tend to do, where the police are basically like, you're scared, nerd.
The police do that. They just do that.
I'm sure they do, but I don't like the idea of putting that into a movie and then, like, people are just like, well, calling the police is never the correct choice.
Right. And other movies would be like, the police are useless, I'll kill them myself. And that's also not, like, what you should be doing.
Yeah. So, and the problem is like, people, when they hear us saying this, will be like, well, nobody's, like, choosing to live their life based off of what's happening in movies. And I'm going to tell you right now, that is not 100% accurate.
I mean, that's why they call it a moral, right? That's something you're supposed to take away. And while this isn't a Disney film where the moral was, like, and they all lived happily ever after because they accepted each other. Like, that's not what they said, but there's a moral behind every movie, even if it's a bad one.
Well, that, and, you know, people think that they can hit each other upside the back of the head and they'll be okay. Or if you lose consciousness for a few seconds, you're fine.
Yeah.
Or in reality,
what is it? The
chloroform?
Chloroform, yeah.
If you just put that over somebody's mouth for a few seconds, you know.
And they knock right out and they'll wake up with not a problem.
Yeah. There's all kinds of stuff that, like, people believe because of movies, and I would not be surprised if there are people, maybe not 100% because of the movie, maybe if it's even just 10%, it's still a fucking problem. You know, that they believe, like, I shouldn't call the police because they're just never gonna fucking, do anything. They aren't ever going to like help me if I feel like I'm being stalked or something or other. If the movie had the cops come by and just like, do you have anything? Oh yeah, I do have I have his picture in my locket, that he sent to me. That would be something, at least. They'd be like, well, we'll hold on to the photo. If we see the guy around, we'll pull him in for questioning.
Well, that's exactly it. Because there's a word for this. Because there's like the CSI TV shows where they're like enhance, and it's like, oh, and now we can look at we can tell exactly who the guy is and run him through the database, and that doesn't happen.
Sure,
it's not a thing that works. But the world seems to think that it does just off of a TV show.
Yeah, and
so
like hacking, they believe hacking works that way. When most of hacking is just kind of like, hey, I'm your IT guy. Tell me your password?
Right.
That's a lot of what hacking is.
God, I hope somebody clicks on this email. Yeah. Or it's like, oh, God, I have to fight the hacker. And it's... When really it's...
Yeah, I asked you to give me your sensitive information, and you did. Like an idiot. That's quite a bit of hacking. And other hacking is done by, like, automatic programs that just do all the work for you. You don't have to do anything. You fucking pop it in, turn it on, and there you go. It's doing the thing. So it's literally when a hacker tells you it'll be 3 minutes, it's because the machine already told them, I will be done with this in 3 minutes.
Right.
So they have no control over going faster or slower. So yeah, there's a ton of stuff in movies like that people are willing to believe, and then when you tell them like, well, we shouldn't include this in movies just in case like somebody like believes it or whatever, and they're like, well, nobody does that, and it's like, well, they do.
Well, there's also the trusting. I like to think that towards the end of the movie where it's like he trusts enough to just sit there and believe nothing's going to happen to him. I do think a lot of people have, I don't know if it's the trusting nature that I'm trying to get at or just the idea that they are invincible or whatever it is, but I do think a lot of people would have that reaction. They're like, he wanted to talk, and he said this was an open area with people watching. It's public.
As if no one has ever been murdered
in public.
Yeah,
right.
As if that has never happened. God, what a great manipulation. Like to say, like, look how open it is. There's people out here, and it's and he doesn't like focus in on like the crowds of people walking by or nothing.
But you do see like trucks like driving in the background.
Sure.
Like this is an open park. This is a public park. Look, there's buoys because like buoys are typically where you can swim safely. I brought that up about the yellow buoy because like you mentioned yellow being brought up several times in this movie, but the fact that it was yellow and specifically a safety implement.
Yeah, Aaron's car is yellow and the front door to Joseph's place is yellow. This is one of the few times in film where I did not see like any significance of like a color that kept reappearing.
But it was, I mean, when they're framing the shot and they are looking at the villas in the background, which I guess is supposed to be like, oh look, anybody could see us, and they framed the one yellow buoy that they didn't have to frame, and frankly, buoys are not generally yellow,
and they're completely unnecessary to have in the shot.
Right.
They could have just not had it.
It had no point in being there or being yellow specifically, but I don't know, maybe that just tied into the security aspect that Aaron very much apparently felt. And I can sit there and be like, I would not. There was no fucking way I would have my back pointed to anywhere besides perhaps the lake.
So if I were to try to be as generous as possible with the yellow color theming thing, you could make an argument that yellow is being used as a like signifier for sickness. And that's why Aaron's car is yellow, because he has the same sickness as Joseph. They're both lonely. They're both like, they both have that problem. So the door is yellow, his car is yellow, and then the buoy at the end. These are the only three things in the movie I can think of that were specifically yellow. Like, stand out, that bright, happy yellow. The problem is it really is that bright, happy yellow. This isn't like a sad, sickly yellow, like jaundice yellow or whatever the fuck.
This was a freshly painted, like straight line yellow.
Like sunflower yellow. Like, it's a very pretty yellow color. So it's like, it's difficult for me to be like that generous about it in all like honesty, but I do think you're right. It is like weirdly there for no reason. It didn't need to be there.
It was almost deliberately put there.
Yeah.
It very much felt like it was a deliberate add-in for that thing. And I mean, that's why I keep on trying to find the symbolism of like, it's a buoy. It's a safety apparatus. Like, and if that, maybe he finally felt comfortable around the man who had the same sickness as him or something like that. And I mean, they bring that up later themselves, so it actually wasn't even necessary for the sake of symbolism, because he brings it up again again later about how you felt comfortable around me. I couldn't harm you.
There are a lot of movies that will use color to try to like let you know, hey, this is what we're getting at here. And then later they'll...
Hey, dummy, in case you missed it.
Yeah. And I don't hate that by any means, because there are times like this where I'm like sitting here going, I don't think the yellow really meant anything. And then, the more we think about it, the more it's like, well, maybe there was something there. And I do think there's even a great argument for yellow being like safety, the door. It is both how you get in and how you get out. So, maybe it is like a measurement of safety. The only way he could be safe is to go through that yellow door. And the only way he could be safe is to get in his yellow car and leave.
I mean, he mentions that. He's like, I'm going to wait in the car because I think that's going to be a good idea. And we were joking about it with the bulletproof glass and shit like that, but he got in his car to feel safe.
Yeah. And the only time he's unsafe is once he left his car to hang out with the guy. There's certainly something there. But then, when we get to that, would he have been safe if he had gone into the water instead of sitting out in the park? I don't think so. I think the guy still probably would have found a way to get out there and murder him in the water. Sort of falls apart maybe on the buoy thing. But I don't know. I think that anytime you're doing color as symbolism, it's always going to have points where it's not as strong as other parts.
Well, yeah, I mean, the whole thing about symbolism is it'll mean something until it doesn't. So, I mean, I'm not saying the water was safe, but the scene itself was supposed to be framed as something where he could feel safe enough to, kick up and cross his legs. And
well, the water was in front of him. Maybe it was trying to say if he had just moved forward or moved ahead, he wouldn't have been in this unsafe situation. Maybe that's what it was. I don't know. There's, again, we could do this until we're blue in the face, but yeah, I think there's something there at the very least. More than I was willing to give it initially. It is really weird that those are the three things that are yellow, though.
Just striking, like you said, strikingly yellow.
Yeah.
They didn't. There's no way they had to be.
Yeah. Every time I've ever seen a buoy, it's orange or red.
Right.
For it to be that safety hazard yellow.
Or for it to be, I've mentioned before, when, English teachers would be like, why were the curtains blue? Well, in the first scene, they're like, there it is, yellow door. He says it. He could just been like, there it is, the house. But he says yellow door.
Yeah, and he doesn't need to say that, and he certainly didn't need to have a yellow car. Yeah, there's something here, certainly. The rest of the movie is strikingly not yellow, though. There are scenes where, if this were the thing that we were trying to get across, either safety or sickness, there could have been some yellow in there, and they didn't have any. So there's something there. Something... when I say something there in this instance, what I mean is, that seems strange that they didn't use it more frequently. And maybe they weren't trying to, even in the ending credits, they have creep in big yellow letters, so there's that.
I mean, yeah, this could be another thing we're overthinking. It's just I don't know, the creep was yellow, and I wanted to use yellow because the theme is yellow.
Yeah.
What's the movie about? It's about the color yellow, and you thought it was about mental illness.
Yeah, we're just trying to discuss the color yellow. I don't think it's absolutely necessary for a filmmaker to be I'm going to have visual style flourishes throughout the film. I think it's fine not to, and just to have a very oh hey, we're going to use found footage style to create a feeling of unease, because we know how everybody feels about those types of movies. But for the first half of the movie, when most of the found footage is being implemented, I guess the rest of the movie feels there's less of that found footage style, and it's more they're actually I don't know. I guess I just because they're outside a lot in the beginning of it, whereas in the rest of the film's runtime they're kind of indoors. I guess I don't really feel as found footagey about that, and maybe that's because of the Blair Witch Project as being mostly outside.
But yeah, with the motion joggles and stuff like
and
that.
And he's chasing him while he's running and stuff, so that's jogging the camera a lot.
Right, as opposed to this one where it's I'm going to set this right here on my nightstand.
Or on my stand board, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. It feels like they kind of wanted to pick and choose when they were using that to up the scariness. And I thought that was a good idea. I was hey, maybe they're trying to say you should feel scared right now, when you really shouldn't, because it was perfectly safe and there wasn't anything weird going on. Again, I really do like the idea of a horror film, quote unquote, where it's not actually a horror film and it's just to get you into that feeling of oh god, this guy is weird and socially awkward, and I don't know if I'm safe or if this is just him being kind of weird. I wish that is the thing that I wish they would have done with it, instead of this kind of like half-baked horror film kind of at the end there, you know? Because it feels like
they could have done something smarter besides, I've been killing for years, and that's the big reveal.
Yeah.
Or like, if this had been a personal thing, like, would it have been scarier if this was something that he felt so personally about that he killed the one man, as opposed to the reveal at the end where he's got a fucking million VHS tapes?
I think it is scarier if he's being completely, like, random about it, and this could happen to anyone. I think that is strictly more frightening than if he has, like, a vendetta against this guy of some kind. I think that when you give a villain, like, a reason to be killing someone, like, oh, I'm killing them because they are the children of the people who killed my mother or something, you know? Like,
or, I mean, even related to this movie, like, I killed him because he rebuked my affections.
Sure. When you give them a reason for doing that, you're kind of, like, taking away an element of horror that could be there, where it is that sort of, like death is sort of a force of nature, and in that way, this guy is death. He's just sort of coming to people at random times and visiting death upon them. He's not particularly violent about the way he kills them. He puts an axe to the back of their head, and let's assume he does that every single time. That's not terribly violent, you know, especially considering, you know, the Saw movies and other films like that, where people are murdered in these horrible, gruesome ways. So he is kind of just, like, killing them in a very, hey, you're just dead now, sort of way. And the fact that
I do kind of think that he kept swinging after that. Like, I don't know.
He did, yeah. But I think that might have been for ease of transport, perhaps.
Did he? Did he, though? Because he walks away from the...
That part of it I take not to be a real thing that happened. The part where he, like, jumps at the camera and goes, wah! And then he also, wah! At the camera himself.
Well, no, not just that, but the fact that he walked away from it at the end. And, like, if we assume that this is a place where people could theoretically, like, walk by and see it, like, someone disassembling and packaging up a body.
Everything after the second swing I don't take to be, like, that really happened. Because, like, I think it was just them setting up for the jump scare there.
Oh.
Yeah. Like, they just wanted to jump scare you, and so they had him go, wah! And then they had the version of him on the camera as well go, wah! And that's more scary than if it was just him going, wah, for no reason. And it gives him a reason to go, wah, instead of just doing it 'cause. Instead, now
that makes me even angrier.
Yeah, no, I don't like it. This is specifically the problem with Blumhouse movies, is at the end of the movie, they, for some reason, decide to do a jump scare. Like, why? And there's no reason for it. Why would the villain, like, why would the monster or the villain or whoever look at the camera and go, bah! At the end of the film? Like, it doesn't make any fucking sense. And I get it, like, I think it's fine to, like, celebrate horror films and celebrate, like, being scary for no reason and whatever, but it doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to do it in every fucking movie. It's like, fucking, what do you call them? The Marvel movies, with every single fucking movie has a fucking stinger at the end where they, like, try to be like, and then, after the movie, stick around for the little tiny 30-second short.
Where we release the next hero that's gonna be...
Or even when it's something, like, really, that doesn't mean anything. Like, it's just them sitting around having a shawarma sandwich or whatever, you know? Like, that doesn't add anything to the next film, or if you miss it, then you missed out, or anything like that. It's kind of a nothing scene.
There's an Indian movie, and I don't know if you've seen it. I forget the name of it, but it's basically Indian Marvel.
The Guardians? Is it The Guardians?
No, it's Gundama.
Okay.
Guy finds out he's got electrical powers, whatever.
Sure.
Come to find out, there's a whole fucking cinematic universe that, like, I don't know about. I don't know anything. You're the one that should know about Indian cinema. How come you don't know about Gundama?
I'm always trying to educate myself on Indian cinema, and I am just woefully bad at it.
But yeah, so Gundama, it feels very Marvel-esque. We've got the hero, and he goes through his own progression of, I'm not a hero, oh, now I'm the hero, and oh, I've got powers. And then there's all this backstory where the bad guys are trying to resurrect a big evil man, and well, he doesn't know why he has powers, but the bad guys know that he's got ancient god blood in him, blah, blah, all this stuff. And at the very end of the Indian Marvel cinematic movie, Gundama, they spoiler the next Indian Marvel hero that's going to come into it. And it's like, oh, so it's not even just an American thing. It's...
Well, a lot of those...
Let me just rehash, because I am aware that you were talking about how Indian cinema is influenced by what I'm not saying that it wasn't. Now go on.
Oh, I was just saying, a lot of the, especially when any, not even just Indian cinema, any filming group is specifically doing like, hey, we're gonna do our own Marvel Cinematic Universe, there are very few things they leave on the cutting room floor. They want to use the formula, basically, and that's kind of part of the formula, and it's hard to ignore, you know? It's hard to say, like, is this something that, like, is necessary in order for this to be successful?
Is this something that's, like, purely American in nature? Or is this just, like, if people are enjoying superhero cinema, do you think that would work in any market?
Do they have to have the stinger at the end, or is it going to fail without it? Like, and if you look at all of the Marvel movies, they have them almost every single damn time.
So, and also are successful.
So it would be hard for somebody who's like making this movie or producing this movie or whatever, making any decisions on it, to say like, nah, you don't need it. You know, might as well. I mean,
look at all these times where they didn't use it and it was successful.
Yeah, but I think we're gonna call it there. We'll just call it an evening.